You're listening to Accounting for Growth, the podcast where growth leaders in accounting go beyond referrals alone and think bigger. I'm Chad Person, your host and the founder and president of Accounting CMO. Each episode, we bring in experts at the edge of accounting innovation to share quick, actionable insights that help you lead with confidence, drive smart growth, and move your firm forward. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Accounting for Growth podcast. I'm Chad Person, your host, and today is episode 3 of our series on leading growth with clarity and confidence. In episode 1, we explored the barriers holding many firms back to achieving sustainable growth. Episode 2, we tackled how to build a modern growth engine. And today, we're taking it one step further and discussing how leaders who aren't marketers by training can still lead marketing and business development effectively and confidently. Charles Brower joins me again to help unpack what it really looks like to lead growth from the partner seat, setting expectations, managing accountability, translating marketing metrics into firm outcomes, all those things. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Chad. Great to be here again. Thank you.
You bet. Again, been thoroughly enjoying our discussion. And today, I think, is perhaps one of the most impactful, I think, for our audience. The reality is, even when a firm has a marketing function and leadership, non-marketers, specifically partners, senior managers, growth leaders, they have to participate in the execution and the management of business development activities to be successful. And for many, this is a real challenge because they've never had formal training or experience with this effort. They're trained to be very good financial leaders. Charles, many growth leaders I meet in CPA firms, they don't see themselves as responsible for, certainly not for marketing and perhaps business development, but they don't know how to translate goals into, leadership when it comes to marketing and the associated teams they've built. They see it as something adjacent, right, to their role. What do you see, and do you agree with this assessment?
Yeah, I think that's true. And in most cases, you've got a legacy organization that may have matured in a different way, along the lines of, partial marketing leadership or maybe even no marketing leadership. And so it's not uncommon to find leaders who are uncomfortable, I think maybe the best word, with the marketing leadership. And I think it's important to dive into and talk about how leadership is involved and what expectations and results are communicated to the marketing team so that you can set yourself up for success.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've spoke to me previously around, this idea of reframing leadership and the idea that we're not asking or insinuating here that CPA should be directing marketing campaigns, but there are certainly roles that they should play. Talk to me a little bit more about what those roles are.
Yeah, so I think even though it's a common mistake to have, let's say, misaligned goals between the marketing organization on one side and a leadership organization on another, the way that you start to solve for that is you take time, leadership has to take time to engage with marketing and set up what we discussed previously, the vision, the go-to-market strategy, the KPIs that are required to get to that roadmap that you want to create. Marketing teams responsible for top, middle, and bottom of the funnel activities. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to align to priorities and to miss the main themes that leadership is really focused on. So you have to have some reference tools, that go-to-market strategy, the funnel, those sorts of things to keep you lined up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you and I were building towards this episode all along. And yeah, as you suggested, if you think back and if you haven't, please go back and listen to our first 2 episodes. We covered the simple fact that, before marketing, right, before you as a marketing leader are looking to, need to make decisions, these growth goals must be defined in measurable terms, right? By client type, by service line, where, what geographies do we feel like there are opportunities to make investments in growth? And so when you have those elements in place with clarity, that removes the ambiguity, the emotion, the fear, right, that you can have when you're responsible for growth efforts and must align with marketing and various objectives, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so when you go through that hard work of building those go-to-market plans by segment, you can refer to those as often as you need to. And the marketing team has its marching orders. Leadership, once you've signed off on that, knows that that's going to be the plan to go forward. And it gives the marketing team the clarity, the focus, the chance to build momentum without going on one-off programs every other month that don't support KPIs.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. I mean, the other notion, the other item I would throw out there, and again, I'm a big believer in this, but again, there's no substitute for having clear, ideal client profiles, right?
Yes.
Oftentimes, if done correctly, those are informed through client interviews and market data, and again, having those defined and having leadership aligned on those ideal client profiles, it takes the guessing out of it. And in many cases, if performed correctly, those kinds of insights give you great clarity and should give you great confidence in not only your messaging, but where that messaging is distributed channel wise, right?
Yes, client profile and a really good understanding of the issues, the challenges, the problems that your clients are facing, even a client feedback loop. We talked about that a little bit too. Those are really common areas to focus on initially so that you can get a grasp of the issues, map them to those solutions that you're offering up, making sure that you're prioritizing in the right way, that you're speaking the right language, you've got the messaging that needs to be set up, and the cadence of activities back to stepping away from things when it's appropriate, but ahead of that, aligning around the cadence of activities, aligning around that go-to-market process, aligning around those ideal client profiles gives you tremendous headway as you go forward.
Yeah, these are common fundamentals for successful marketing strategies, but not always common to find them in place in some firms who, frankly, just haven't had the opportunity yet to make the investments in more formal marketing strategy. So you and I have spoke previously about the most effective non-marketers at times get really good at asking why, right? Why this initiative? Why now? Why is that important, Charles?
Well, there's nothing wrong with asking why. It's a really good point, and I would tell you that asking why at the outset, combined with the hard work of creating that strategy, that go-to-market, very practical go-to-market strategy, will help you in the short and long term to start to put the right things into motion. So let me give you an example. If you decide that your market has a certain buyer that maybe is outside of your traditional buyer, maybe you're appealing to the COO instead of the CFO around a set of solutions, and you start to dig into those client profiles and the client feedback loop, and you uncover the 5, 6, 7 top issues that you think are relevant. You may actually find that you need to define the solutions you're offering a little differently, or you may need to subtract from the solutions or add to them in a certain way to get to where you want to go in terms of growing that particular segment. And you can start to see if there's any seasonality. As another example, there have been several cases where there's seasonality to a tax offering for sure, or seasonality to reporting or compliance issues where you're appealing to maybe a new buyer with a new set of issues, and you want to make sure you're dead on with the timing, the messaging, and the offer, the value add and the proposition. All of that's contained in the go-to-market, and so you create this playbook that you can refer to as time goes by.
Yeah, no, got great insights. Bringing it all together really is the theme we're talking about here today. So let's shift Um, let's shift and start focusing on, as a non-marketer leading growth efforts. Let's talk about measuring what matters. Again, data, right, can give non-marketers real clarity, real confidence, especially in my opinion, CPAs who are kind of data centric by nature, right? Financial data, especially. When you know what to measure, when you align on the KPIs, right, that are the important ones for growth, that really creates confidence and clarity for them in that role. You agree?
I couldn't agree more. And I think so. Today, you can measure everything, right? You can measure all aspects of what you're doing with digital campaigns. Just because you can measure everything doesn't mean you should.
Good point.
All right. So,
Good.
so you have to decide what are going to be those KPIs that are going to be most meaningful for your firm. It could be things that you mentioned, content uptake. It could be website traffic and SEO. It might be lead quality. It might be a whole host of other things. You need to figure out what those most important things are. Again, I'm going to say that's built into your go-to-market plan as a part of what you're doing. And you're going to find that those metrics, those KPIs are going to stand out because they're going to be a part of the action plan and part of the marketing team's destination for what they want to do. Every firm's going to have slightly different approach, slightly different outputs. That's why you need a strong leader in marketing to help guide that along the pathway.
Yeah. Yeah, and so another note on this area is it's absolutely critical again to have those KPIs, those meaningful KPIs that really influence revenue. It's also equally important to have um, the technology in place, the processes in place that can not only gather but consistently report on that, right? It's does you no good to have KPIs defined if you can't consistently report on them with accuracy and with confidence.
Yeah, technology is the backbone of everything we do today. And a couple of things. You need to make sure that your technology can support those KPIs that you're trying to achieve, right? That there's not a gap, a missing piece of the puzzle, and that technology can scale over time. I've seen a lot of instances where a firm is stuck with an old platform and they're really beyond the use of that platform. They've got to move to a different one. Sometimes too, there's another way to skin this animal. You sometimes can rent your platform, and I would encourage leadership to look at the scope of process, people, and technology and find the area where they're comfortable, because you don't always have to buy a very fancy new platform. Sometimes you can test drive or rent something, and it's perfectly fine for the types of things you're doing.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Okay, so let's put a bow on this part around KPIs. I mean, again, establish clear KPIs that kind of link the marketing performance to revenue outcomes. Again, so critical to give non-marketers tangible indicators of success and confidence as they kind of help oversee this area. The other final note on this would be, review progress regularly, right? Monthly, certainly quarterly, just as you would a financial statement. And those are real keys to continue your momentum with clarity and confidence. Let's shift now to the all-important attribute of accountability when it comes to pursuing sustainable growth. Um, so accountability, right? Growth, I think, as we both would agree, isn't a project. It's a discipline, way of thinking, and building a growth culture inside of a CPA firm really depends on a lot of things, right? But alignment, a cadence associated with connecting and staying accountable, being transparent, etc. I find that even in high performing organizations, high growth organizations, I've actually seen accountability missing in certain areas. So, talk to me, give me your perspective on marketing and specifically how being disconnected from firm results and then as a result, kind of not accountable to firm results can really have a negative impact on firms' growth.
Yeah, there are many ways to also go awry with the conversation around accountability. And I guess the overarching thing I would say is make sure that both delivery personnel and marketing are accountable, number one. You can't have one without the other. It creates headaches that you just don't want if you don't have accountability across the whole ecosystem.
Sure.
Second thing I would say is that those ideal client profiles, the market demand signals, client feedback loops, competitive intelligence, all those things are going to help you when you start to establish reputation internally with client delivery and marketing, when the relationships are starting to mature and you say, oh, these marketing folks really get my business. That's going to create and drive accountability for the marketing team around the actions and the motions they put in the market. And conversely, the involvement from the service delivery folks in that campaign. And data is what ties those two things together.
So correct. And again, for me, accountability, for many, I think if it's handled incorrectly, accountability can have a negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
But I have always been taught and chose to say, look, it's accountability is ownership, simply put. It's your ability, your willingness to take to rise above whatever circumstances are in front of you and take ownership, and take the leadership reins in many cases. And so, yeah, I think again, still going back to what we've touched on just a moment ago, accountability means clear ownership of growth goals, right? At that partner level, at that service line level. That means being confident with the KPIs that you've chosen to monitor and having scorecards and a consistent cadence for, again, monitoring those, and just being open, right? With transparently keeping everyone aligned on progress, and ideating on overcoming obstacles, because we both know no plan is perfect. And being accountable means participating in how you getting a train back on the tracks when it's off the tracks, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So I'll offer up, just to dig into that just a little bit. You can build in accountability by assigning cooperative activities across the funnel. And I can unpack that more, but I'd have to charge you. So,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so let me just leave with the statement that accurate data and the timely treatment of that data is king. That's what ties and knits things together.
Yeah, great insights. Okay, so let's move on now to kind of resourcing here. I mean, so we've talked about at this point getting a non-marketer in a position where they can feel comfortable and more confident about leading a growth strategy. Let's talk more about the talent or resourcing that's needed for partners to have the team required to achieve growth. I mean, take a step further. There's all kinds of options for firms depending upon their size and where they're at in their investments. There's the opportunity to build a team in-house. There's an opportunity to leverage an agency or go the fractional model way, or a combination of those. What are your thoughts on kind of resourcing the talent needed to drive a growth?
So I really think that modernizing your marketing approach, getting to the clarity and confidence that you're trying to achieve, means you've got to assess the talent, internal and external, required to execute on that go-to-market visioning, right? On that
Right.
go-to-market
Right.
plan. They have to fit together. And in the initial stage, you don't have to have a giant team. That's not required, but you do need to have the right mix of FTEs and perhaps agency support. A great example is a social media agency that you can plug and play, or a creative team that's outside the four walls that will help you along the way and can scale the way you want. But proper staffing's key. It's just critical.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the areas that I love to help firms along their journey, and for me, it all boils down to meeting them where they're at, um, and what I mean by that is some firms literally have no in-house marketers, and frankly haven't really consistently leveraged any outside support either. So, where are you at in your growth trajectory? What growth goals have you set? Because whatever those growth goals are, there's going to be a certain amount of investment and expertise and time that's going to be required to get there. And then don't forget about your culture, right? As a firm, the culture that you have in place in terms of how you go about pursuing growth and who's accountable for it and et cetera. I think that speaks a lot. And I help firms think through that, but that speaks a lot to what is the right choice for you, be it starting small in house, maybe building on that with an agency or fractional professional. So, again, culture for me is a big part of it.
Yeah, I would, and this is where I think the fractional CMO model really shines because you get someone who has experience, depth, a real understanding of the professional services business, which is unique, and can bring immediate value to the table around resourcing, around hitting those connective points that are important around building that go to market, even for a very small firm, Chad, even for, for small firms who are just trying to get started, trying to break through and be more competitive, or trying to get their solutions and those issues lined up properly. The person who has the experience and the track record brings enormous value, whether it's an FTE or fractional.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree with you. I often see, especially firms who maybe are a little, they're new into making these initial investments in a marketing function. I think the fractional model really is has a lot of benefits. Again, the last thing you want to do as a non-marketer, maybe a managing partner who's a non-marketer leading a firm's growth strategy, ultimately is to bring in someone that needs to be trained to do the job, right? Or doesn't have the full experience necessary to help you achieve that. So I think a fractional oftentimes can be a great choice for those firms who are making initial investments because they have the experience needed to kind of jump in immediately, help you make important decisions about people, process, technology. And never forget that a fractional oftentimes their main outcome is to get you to a point where they're not needed, or at least not to be working inside of the organization, day to day or even week to week. They're there to try to drive you towards that next step in maturity in your marketing or growth function, and then can always be there from an advisory perspective.
I think that's very well put. And one of the things we haven't touched on, but that's really important to this conversation, is budget, right?
Mm, yeah,
Many small firms are saying, "Hey, wait a minute, I can't afford a really expensive person or a really expensive group of 10 people. It's just not it's not possible." Well, so budget covers staff, overhead, technology, and programs. And if you're not considering all of those, then you're cheating yourself a little bit. And this point around staffing and resourcing it's really critical to have all of those into consideration. So if your budget is X and you say, okay, this portion's spent on campaigns, really facing the market, getting to clients, we only have this much left for staffing and resourcing, then maybe a fractional model is the right way to go because it's certainly a cost-effective way to do things.
absolutely. Well said. So let's move into the kind of the final topic I wanted to make sure we cover today, and we've kind of framed this as how to as a marketing leader, right? How to build a culture of continuous improvement, and I often like to call it just how to build a growth culture, because I think to build a culture that is successful in achieving growth consistently, there is this notion of continuous improvement and innovation going on. I think from my experience, firms that thrive treat growth as a kind of an ongoing practice and way of thinking, not a one. It's not a document, right, that sets on somebody's desktop. Talk to me, Charles, about how you see kind of the opportunity to build a culture of continuous improvement as a non-marketer leader.
Yeah, I haven't seen any marketing organization that couldn't be improved in some way, right? That it just they're all different. Whether you're in the technology business as I've been, or in the pure CPA world, or some combination thereof, there's always room for improvement. And so firms that have a strong alignment to their growth vision, that are dedicated to achieving that growth and planning the roadmap that needs to be planned, are going to find that balance of planning, execution, and results that they're trying to achieve. And I'd say encourage your team to experiment within boundaries, but experiment with value propositions and messaging and channels and feedback loops, because those are always going to be variables that you can pull back into the conversation that are really important. Pick those that you can truly experiment with, and weave them into the conversation.
Yeah, great points on evaluating messaging and value propositions, etc. For me, I think I've mentioned it at least once, maybe throughout this series, but one of the things that I try to drive firms and leaders of firms to do is to understand what it is to think from the outside in. And when you think from the outside in, especially when it comes to strategy development, it's really putting the market and the buyer first. Trying to really, as an organization, stay in tune with where your ideal client and the market is headed. I find far too often firms are just too focused on what they know, what they do well, their constraints, what they feel like they can't do well today. And that really puts up walls often if you're not careful to understanding where the market is headed, and you can find yourself at a disadvantage very quickly, especially in our environment today where technology is just transforming everything that seems to be going on around us. So staying in tune with where the market is headed, I feel like, is critical.
I think keeping your pulse on the dynamic needs of your client is it's job one. I had an old managing partner at a big firm tell me once, Charles, don't just focus on what the client needs are. Everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
little bit of a generalization, but
Yeah.
that was his philosophy, and to a certain extent, it really does work. It still works, and especially when you're dealing with a whole host of issues that ideal client may need from you, may be asking you, or maybe you need to find someone else who can help them solve those problems too. And so, listening to them, charting that, finding a way to address those issues over time will make you invaluable to those clients. Absolutely.
For sure. And again, I mean, when we talk about a culture of continuous improvement, a growth culture, I mean, we're really kind of talking about people. And so, I think there's no substitute for um, making sure that everyone in the organization, from that staff level, new accountant, CPA, up to the partner level, they understand how to contribute to growth. And every one of those levels can contribute in a little bit different way, but everybody can see a path to contribute to growth, feels like they're a part of executing towards those growth goals. That in and of itself, I think, is just critical to kind of unlocking and building this culture. And then I also would say, there's a lot of focus now on reskilling. Inside of firms today, trying to get them to be more advisory in their focus. I think it's important to create a culture where it's okay to fail, fail fast, right? And just this continuous learning means that you're going to have some things that don't quite frankly work out, but it gives us an opportunity to learn from those and move forward.
Yeah, it may not be as much of a mindset in the CPA firms as it is in technology, for instance, to, fast fail and recover and move on and do something else. But it is an important aspect of the world we live in. The world we live in moves very, very quickly, and people, again, are looking for answers far beyond the time far before they ever talk to you these days. They're going to find some answers, and you need to be aware of those issues they're challenging them. You need to be present at the right moment. Timing is a big part of this. And experimenting with those things that get to those folks that provide the right messaging, provide the right value proposition will help you again narrow in on the things that are most meaningful. And then I just finally say is that it does come back to people. Celebrate the wins, big and small. They're all important. Make sure you recognize, as a leader, make sure you're recognizing those people responsible on the delivery side, on the marketing side, the biz dev side, responsible for success inside your firm.
Great. That's a great note to end on, Charles. Being able to recognize and celebrate success in people that really are the ones driving that success. So across this three-part series, we've gone from identifying barriers to building a growth engine, and now to giving some perspective on how to lead it confidently, especially as a non-marketer. So whether you're a managing partner, you're a COO, or growth leader of a particular service line, I think that the key takeaway is just clarity, accountability, alignment, all turn marketing from this mysterious thing into something that's measurable and fun, frankly, to be around. Charles, thanks again for joining me and contributing to this three-part series.
My pleasure. Thank you.
To our listeners, I hope this series has helped you start thinking about growth a little bit differently, and certainly lead growth in your firm with more clarity and more confidence. Thank you. That's a wrap on this episode of Accounting for Growth, powered by your CMO. We help accounting leaders break the status quo. Please subscribe, share, and stay sharp. Your next big growth move starts now.